Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carsten Haber. I'm a board member and host of the CSCR lecture series at the Center for Student Coastal Research in Cohasset. The Center for Student Coastal Research is a nonprofit research and educational facility with a central mission to engage students in local environmental science projects. So now I would like to introduce our webinar speaker. Dr. Alexander Moore is a climate and health scientist and economist. He's an associate professor of environmental health at Long Island University in New York City, assistant research professor at the Climate Change Institute, and group leader for a revolutionary project at Harvard University, where he also earned his PhD. With research spanning 4 continents, Dr. Moore uses cutting-edge tools to engage the public in the realities of climate change and the quest for solutions to it. He leads a project on the impact of climate change on human and ecosystem health and the economy. His research has been covered by CNN, NPR, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Science Magazine, The Guardian, Popular Science, and more than 150 other print and online publications worldwide. Having learned to dive at the age of 4, Dr. Moore has accumulated more than 1,500 hours in underwater expeditions and surveys. Wow. He served as a staffer in the US Senate. He is a fellow of the Theodore Roosevelt Institute and the Explorers Club. He is a former managing director of the World Ocean Forum and currently director of communications for Blue Ocean Watch. All his published data is freely available to the public and also displayed at Harvard's Maps, a groundbreaking Google Maps-like website that overlaps ultra-high resolution environmental, health, and economic big data in maps that use artificial intelligence and machine learning to find trends in humans, trends humans could never see. Raised and educated in southern Italy and Greece, in the early part of his life, Dr. Moore moved permanently to New York City on his own to complete his secondary education. He attended college in Chicago and eventually Washington University in St. Louis. He continued his studies in an interdisciplinary PhD program at Harvard University, where he earned multiple coveted teaching awards and where he has conducted research for the past 15 years. So the title of the guest lecture by Dr. Moore is Instability, Climate Change, Health Loss of Wildlife, and What We Can Do About It. So Alex, I'm handing the cursor to you. Please take it away.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Carsten. Thank you all for inviting me to give this talk tonight. I absolutely adore giving talks in my local community. I actually do live in Hall whenever I can, and love Cohasset. And although I am an immigrant and therefore I have no real hometown, Hall is and New England as being the place where I lived the longest, Massachusetts in particular, and I consider it my home. I'm currently in New York City where I teach, and but I'm actually coming back this weekend to vote. So, those are all my titles. I'm hoping that at some point I'll be able to reduce the number of titles, and my signature will just be in one line. But at this moment, I have a lot of titles, and the reason for that is that I do a lot of interdisciplinary work across multiple universities, and I bridge these universities for their strengths in one project that is focused on the impact of climate change on people's health and the economy, and the impact of people on climate and the environment. I've worked at Harvard since 2005 when I started my graduate degree, which I finished about 7-8 years later. And then I started a postdoc there, and now I actually have a project that I continue to work on in collaboration with the Climate Change Institute and Long Island University, where I'm teaching currently in the Department of Environmental Health. You can find me. I'm very big on outreach. I don't want scientists to be difficult to find or difficult to speak to. So if you want to speak to me, you can find me on social media fairly easily. I don't I don't particularly, although I get notifications from all of these, I don't particularly love Facebook or Twitter. I do love Instagram. You'll find me there very easily, and of course, you can find me by email on any of my websites. My initiative, just for by way of background, the work I do, and perhaps I can play this now, uses cutting edge transdisciplinary science. That means that I basically use everything that's available to me in order to reconstruct these retrospective studies, case studies of climate crises, so that we can learn from our past experiences. Most publications in climate science these days, if you look at what's available in even especially the major journals in climate science, most of these are in fact models. What a model is a prediction of the future. It is based on inferences on our analysis of the past, but it really is a prediction of the future, and usually leaves out the human experience that we have documented from past crises. There have been past climate crises, both human-induced, both caused by humans, and both natural and also natural. And it's important that we actually compare our experience with the past and see how humans have weathered, no pun intended, those crises, so that we may learn from them and face the current climate crisis, which is entirely man-made, and in order to use science for our policies. So I think most people are familiar with this graph. I promise I'll have fewer graphs than I usually do. This graph is known as the hockey stick. It comes from a publication by Michael Mann, who's one of the more prominent climate scientists out there. And it's known as the hockey stick because it's shown to look like a hockey stick. And it's basically temperature over the past 1,000 years. I focus on the history of the past 1,000 years, and history of climate and health and economics over the past 1,000 years, to understand how humans have lived through this. And as you can see, since 1800, in the last 200 years, we've really started increasing in temperature in a way that we've never seen before, certainly not at this speed. And multiple records tell us this. It's not just one record. And that temperature differential for the last 100 years has been about 1 degree. And what we want to avoid for the future is a 2-degree world, a world where we increase our temperature since in the last century by 2 degrees Celsius, which would be rather catastrophic for especially the people who live on coasts like us in Cohasset. That is what the prediction is at the top right, that we will actually increase by way more than 2 degrees because carbon dioxide and methane, as well as other greenhouse gases, which we are producing and putting into the atmosphere, are functioning like a blanket, keeping the heat that comes into the sun, from the sun into the atmosphere, from reflecting back into space. So it's just like we have too many blankets, just like on an unseasonably warm winter day, and you have too many blankets on and you want to take them off. Well, unfortunately, taking them off is more complicated than we can handle at the moment. So this is what another way to show the same data. This is actually the highest resolution climate record on the planet. It is better than Mann's data from a few decades back. This data comes from the heart of Europe, from an alpine ice core, which my team dug up from a glacier in the Western Alps at the border between Italy and Switzerland. From an ice cores can tell us all sorts of things. They're basically like trapping the DNA of the atmosphere for every year. In fact, every season for the last 2,000 years in our case. It's if any of you have seen Jurassic Park, you know how the mosquito kept the DNA of course, it's impossible, but kept the DNA of dinosaurs by sucking their blood, you know, from millions of years ago, and then the mosquito was found, and they figure out what a dinosaur looked like. Well, we can basically do the same thing for real for our atmosphere. It's like an ice core traps the DNA of the atmosphere over time in ice layers, and we can read those layers and see the chemical composition of the atmosphere, and also read into it like a book at this point what the temperature was for the last 2,000 years. Here I'm just showing you the last 500 years. And in most cases, most of us only see in our lifetime the really, really extreme temperature at the top right, the extreme temperature increase of 1 degree in the last century, or even less. Most of us don't live a century. And we consider that normal. We feel that that's normal because I often ask my audiences, how do you cook a lobster? Does anybody want to answer that question? How do you cook a lobster? What's the right way to do it? There must be a cook in the room somewhere.
I cook lobsters. Fast is better.
Fast is better, but if you put them in a pot of hot water, they're going to try to climb out, right? Yeah. Well, in most cases, if you put them in a pot of cold water, warming the water, the lobster just doesn't really realize that the water is warming, and it won't scream as much. So yes, fast is better, but it may just, if you go slowly, the lobster won't complain as much. And that's a slightly more humane. You should actually kill it before you cook it. That's really the most humane way. Well, we're the lobster in a pot of cold water warming up very slowly, and we only see just the very last 30 years of temperature difference, and we don't realize that it's warming a lot faster, a lot more in a more extreme way than we know, because we don't live 500 years. As you can see here, the normal, the baseline as it's known, is a lot lower than the last 1 degree increase, and therefore we are actually in a pot of much hotter water than we think. Another thing that most people don't realize is that a lot of this heat that comes from the sun and gets trapped in the atmosphere really does not go into the ice, which is that sliver there. It does not go into the earth, and it does not go into the atmosphere either. That purple sliver is, if you think that the atmosphere has gotten warmer over the past 30 years of your life, your average lifetime, the atmosphere has not actually absorbed that heat. That purple sliver is how much in percentage the heat goes into the atmosphere. Most of the heat has gone into the ocean. That's the deeper ocean, and this is the upper ocean. And 63% of the heat that is trapped in the Earth's climate system goes into the upper ocean, the upper 200 meters, and 31% goes into the deeper ocean, for a total of 94%. Only 6% goes into land ice or atmosphere. So if you think that the temperature in the place you live, which is on land, has gotten hotter over the last 30 years, well, try multiplying that by 30. You'll get an idea of what it's like in the ocean. And this makes a huge difference for wildlife. It makes a huge difference for our fisheries. It makes a huge difference for the atmosphere as well, because the ocean is the engine that controls climate. So in New England in particular, in the Gulf of Maine, the water has warmed faster than 99% of all other bodies of water in the rest of the world in the past 35 years. You can see it here in the top, in the black square around us. You can see how much redder that area is. That means that the ocean is way hotter. And this data is from my colleague Andrew Pershing at the Gulf of Maine Fisheries and the Climate Change Institute. He showed the impact of this warming, of this extreme warming, on the most important fishery, historically most important fishery in New England, besides lobsters, and that's cod. In this article, he showed that cod cannot adapt fast enough for the temperature difference that we are experiencing due to man-made climate change. So the sun heats the earth receives the heat and gets trapped by this blanket of carbon dioxide, methane, greenhouse gases that we cause by just combusting fossil fuels. And that heat has nowhere to go except the ocean, and it goes into the ocean. We're literally alive because of the ocean. Without the ocean, we'd be frying. The heat would not have a heat sink to go into. And just to show you, again, just to think about this for a second, the organisms that live in this area of the ocean, in the deeper ocean, have evolved to live within a 1 degree of difference in temperature. Especially benthic, the bacteria, can only really live within a 1 degree of difference. If you go very deep in the ocean, most organisms there do not react well to temperature difference. And you all know this better than I am not a biologist. But imagine the impact of 31% of this heat on the marine ecosystem and the deep ocean, especially benthic marine ecosystems that have evolved in a much more specific temperature range over the last few million years. The good news is, if you dive these days, even though we are 5%, I believe the last I checked with Andrew, we are 5% of what we should be at in order for the cod population to actually recover. So that's, I think, a figure of 25% of total. So we're 5% of that 25%. So we're very, very low. And of course, you can't catch cod anymore, essentially. But if you dive, you will find cod. I have seen it. It exists. It is not extinct. And while it may be migrating to colder waters in order to adapt, as Andrew suggested in the outstanding science article, and while the sizes of the animals are much smaller, the animals are in fact out there. And that is an encouraging thought. Oh, here's a video. I think this is a video of a recent dive. And I just love to pepper a little bit of positive information. It's important to pay attention how beautiful the underwater ecosystem is. So few of us, only 0.05% of us actually ever peek under the waves and look at 71% of what the planet is, which is ocean. So, and speaking of that, there are many other species in our coast, on our coasts, that are absolutely outstanding to interact with. And, you know, I think that the best way to have a culture shift for people to actually start caring about the environment in ways that they haven't before, and for people, even moderates, even undecided people that don't believe in climate change so much or don't believe in environmentalism so much, for them to actually start caring about these issues, the best way is to engage the public in the beauty and the astonishing complexity and balance that that nature provides. And I'm an ocean person, so to me the ocean is home, and I love showing people the beauty of these things. This is just off the coast of Cohasset and Hall, right here, right in our home. You know, anybody can do this. You can find a pipefish, a northern pipefish, in your backyard. It's literally your backyard. And you know, once you're hooked, once people are hooked to this, it's very difficult for them to stop caring about the environment, stop caring about what they have right there. They will modify their behavior. And that is really what we want. That's what we need to talk about. So I often like to intersperse this type of information within my talks for people to actually start understanding what we're here, what the stakes are that we could lose. We could lose this beauty. We could lose this amazing ecosystem right at our doorstep, simply by ignoring its existence and by continuing to exploit natural resources in an unsustainable way. As David Attenborough says, you know, whatever you cannot do forever is unsustainable. We cannot continue burning fossil fuels forever. We cannot continue fishing with industrial and commercial fishing forever. We cannot continue to eat very protein-rich diet, especially in beef, forever, because all of these things will affect the ocean ecosystem. And we cannot continue to ignore invasive species and the importing invasive species because of globalization into our ecosystems forever, because it will completely destroy our ecosystems. Case in point is Heterosiphonia japonica, or red seaweed, as you can see it here. This is just a picture literally right in front of Cohasset, showing how this seaweed, which really blooms in the spring and by June covers everything. So if any of you venture a little deeper than just the first few feet of the beach and go snorkeling or diving, you will see this invasive seaweed, which comes from the Sea of Japan, covering all sorts of surfaces, especially the rocky surfaces of Cohasset and Hall that are everywhere. And by August, this is what you see, a sea of red. There's very little research on this and what has happened here. This is a case in point. It's a perfect example. Cargo ships bring products, including fossil fuels from the Pacific or coal from the Pacific into the Atlantic. They wash their tanks, or their hulls carry the spores of invasive seaweed from algae from other ecosystems into our waters. Those spores are released either because the tanks are washed, or because the hulls of these ships are in our waters for many years or for many months, and those spores give rise to the seaweed. And it turns out that our oceans are warming a lot faster than everywhere else, and the sweet spot temperature, we reached the sweet spot temperature for several months in our waters that allows for the seaweed to just bloom, and there's nothing that eats it, and it completely covers the seafloor. It loves our rocky shores, and it suffocates by August, September, it suffocates especially benthic wildlife, including lobsters. I mean, lobsters are bottom feeders. They live on the ocean floor. Very rarely do they swim out above it. And of course, skates are the same. So this is what you could see. This is actually not Cohasset. This is York, Maine. And so it reaches as far back, as far up as Orono, midway through Maine. It's not simply limited to the shores of Massachusetts. This is Sandy Beach in 2017. And this happens periodically, and you'll get an article in the Patriot Ledger, you'll get an article perhaps in the Hull Times, and oh, look at the red seaweed on the beach. It's isn't it stinky? And maybe somebody will call the town office, and somebody will remove this material. But is anybody asking why? What is the ecological disaster that we are witnessing? And the reality is there's very little research into the seaweed. There's very little research into what solution we may find to remove it from our shores. Once an invasive species is brought, just like lionfish in the Caribbean and the Atlantic, which of course lionfish is a Pacific species, it's eating up everything. And they can't get rid of it, because when you have 20,000 eggs a week laid, what are you going to do? This is Gun Rock Beach, same exact phenomenon in 2018. And this is really all you can find about the research, and it comes from Cornell. There isn't that much. You look at Heterosiphonia japonica or different other species of Heterosiphonia, and you'll find nothing. Very, very little, to my knowledge. I haven't done a literature search in the last few months, but every time I ask, people say, yeah, no, there is nothing. This is a crucial area of research. I am not a marine biologist. I'm not a marine botanist. I've told Sylvia Earle, who is, can we please do something about this? Very little is being done. So, but occasionally it will show up. The latest I've seen is 2018. So, and this is me going to look for these photos, just to prove you that these photos are in fact taken near our shores. And of course, this was 2018, one of the young humpbacks that washed out on Cohasset shores. We have unusual mortality events that are caused by changes in the environment, as NOAA and others, and including National Geographic, have noticed on the East Coast. It is increasing. Unusual mortality events are increasing, most likely due to either bacterial or chemical changes in the ocean that are due to the outrageous warming that we have seen. We have reached temperatures of 78 degrees at the surface in New England. When I first came here as an immigrant 20 years ago, I was raised in the Mediterranean, in southern Mediterranean, and I love the ocean. And as Karsten said, I got admitted into a university in Chicago and then Washington University, so very far away, landlocked. And I remember taking trips to Maine and Massachusetts to see the ocean because I missed it. It was like feeling thirsty. So every spring break, every summer, I just get in the car, drive all the way. Pennsylvania never ended. I remember, all the way to the ocean, just to see it. I remember, having been raised in the Mediterranean, I remember touching the ocean and just getting cramps because the Mediterranean is a lot warmer than the Atlantic. In my lifetime, in the last 20 years, this has stopped being the case. This has stopped being the case. We reach 78 degrees routinely at the surface. The fact that I can go diving in a 3mm suit by the end of the summer is outrageous. It shouldn't be the case in the North Atlantic, and it is. So that's really the lobster in the hot boiling water. The same is happening, by the way, on the West Coast, although on a little less because the Pacific is a lot bigger and the heat gets distributed differently. But we are seeing endangered whales dying more and more because of changes in the environment. As I said, 30 times more heat goes into the ocean than it goes into into the atmosphere, land, or ice. So if we look at more global, on a global scale rather than just the United States, we can see that Australia in particular is really bearing the brunt of climate change in terms of both economic and ecosystem. We see the occasional thing, we see things that affect some industries. Essentially, the tourist industry on the east coast of Australia is taking a giant hit. It's a $6 billion industry that cannot survive if ocean temperatures continue to rise at the levels that they have. In 2013, I ran an expedition there in the northernmost area of the Great Barrier Reef, a place called Lizard Island, which is the most tropical, most untouched island that you can reach on the Great Barrier Reef. It is absolutely gorgeous. Took, again, gorgeous pictures of the ecosystem. The reason why I went in 2013 was that I was consulting with my colleagues and noticed that heat waves underwater, because the ocean also has heat waves just like we do in the atmosphere. Heat waves underwater were increasing, and I was very worried that an ocean heat wave would wipe out the coral on the Great Barrier Reef before I could see it in its most pristine condition. So I went and took as many pictures as I could, and had 3 days, wonderful days of diving all around the Great Barrier Reef to take sort of what a witness statement of what this ecosystem is like, which is really outstanding. And already I could see the impact of bleaching. You can see at the bottom there in the center. This is staghorn coral, and you can see that right here in this area there is a bleached patch where the staghorn has become white, and then also is being attacked by algae. Turns out that 3 years after I went on that expedition, what we expected to happen happened, and we had one of the worst heat waves in probably the worst heat waves in Australian history. In the Eastern Australian Current brought really hot waters all the way up to the Great Barrier Reef, and we had an enormous bleaching event where 90% of the Great Barrier Reef was affected. Just to give you an idea, ocean temperature over the last a few years, that has been the progression. And you can see as we reach the projected, that's us now, and so you can see really the enormity of what we have experienced recently. And in 2016, it was really outrageous. So just to give you another example of this, because I think graphics are really important to convey. This is a NASA, what's called a reanalysis. Basically, they take data from all over the world and they create maps of where it's hot and where it's cold, and where it has been hot and cold all over the world for the last 140 years. It takes only a minute. I think it's worth taking a look. The year is at the top right, so you can follow. We're at the end of the 19th century. Now we're in the 20th century. You can see where the temperature is, how the temperature is distributed. Here's a climate anomaly over Europe. And then things start warming. Cars become more common. Fossil fuels become more common, especially oil. World War II is past, now the 50s. And look at what's happening at the poles. Keep an eye on the poles. At the North Pole especially. This is 1970s. And this is the last 30 years. This is sea surface temperature. So it's not ocean temperatures, it's sea surface temperature. So it's that tiny little sliver, purple sliver I showed you earlier, not the ocean. The ocean is absorbing 94% of the heat. So you can multiply the effect of this in the ocean by several times to understand really what is going on, what we're doing to our oceans. And this is what we're doing. This is just an example. After the 2016 heat wave and the on the Great Barrier Reef, we returned, and this was what we found. Staghorn coral, most of it completely gone. And here you can see the before and after. To the left is the 2013, to the right is the 2016 after the bleaching event due to heat. When the water gets really hot, the coral gets stressed and it releases all its pigments, all its colors. And the colors are given by algae that basically take the energy from the sun and give it to the coral. It's a symbiotic relationship between the animal, the coral, that creates these beautiful sculptures, and the algae in the coral that live in the coral. The coral ejects them; it just spits them out when it's too hot, and that's why it becomes white. And then these predatory algae attach to the coral, and you see this brown stuff. It also affects a megafauna. The giant clam was dead. These things, are decades old, and it's a giant loss to lose these animals. It's not like you can replace them right away like an oyster. So of course, we've seen the effects of this in science articles, where this is a Nature article from I believe 2018, where you see on the left the coral loss on the Great Barrier Reef. This is the east coast of Australia, 60% closest to the equator, and less so closer to closer to the poles, the South Pole. And here on the right, you see the heat, the temperature differential. And you can see how one is related to the other. You lose coral when the ocean is hot. It's that simple. And the Great Barrier Reef is the largest structure built by animals, including us, on the planet. It has taken thousands of years to be created. It's the only animal-built structure that you can see from space. It's incredible, and we're losing it. We're losing it. It's a $6 billion industry. If you don't care about animals, care about money, you lose that, and the biodiversity is gone, because once the coral dies, all the biodiversity, all the animals that rely on that ecosystem disappear. So it's not going to be around for our children or children's children. And what a loss that is for everybody. And the implications, of course, what is called a trophic cascade, that is the butterfly effect, if you want, of losing this giant ecosystem, we can't even predict, because nature is way too complex for us to actually understand the implications, the consequences of what we are causing. One of the consequences is the loss of seagrass. Seagrass meadows are disappearing too. Seagrass is one of the best carbon sinks we have on the planet. And these cute animals called dugongs, which are the Pacific version of the manatee, feed on them almost exclusively. So we're losing them too. So we're losing a plant which fixes carbon, that takes carbon out of the ocean and out of the atmosphere, because a lot of seagrass gets exposed to the atmosphere. It's one of the few things that can take carbon out of the ocean, and when carbon is in the ocean, CO2, it actually makes the ocean more acidic, which also bleaches the coral. So we're losing, because of ocean temperature, we're losing the seagrass. Therefore, there's more carbon available, more acidification. The mammals are dying because of it, because they don't have enough food. And this is called positive feedback, but actually it's a negative feedback. It's a vicious circle, is what we call it in layman's terms. So if you want to know more about dugongs and how they're affected by climate change, and how their ecosystem, including the Great Barrier Reef, is being affected, you can log on to savedugong.org, which is one of the nonprofits that I'm involved with, that I founded in 2013. They're extremely affectionate animals. If you meet them, they'll actually hug you. There used to be herds of these animals all throughout the Pacific and Indian Oceans, herds. The first time they were described by explorers in the 1500s, the explorers would go into the ocean with their little rowboats and could pet them. They could touch them. Some of them actually hunted them and chose the ones that they liked the most by how much fat they had, because they let themselves be touched. And to this day, they're extremely sociable animals, except that we have reduced their numbers enormously to barely 60, 70,000. And so they can't find each other. They cannot find each other. They're most closely related to elephants, which means that their reproductive cycle is very slow. They only have one calf every 6 to 10 years. They live up to 80. So that at most they'll have maybe 5 calves all throughout their lives. But if they can't find each other and mate, they can't have calves. So they don't see very well. They hear, but they don't see very well. But the sound is what really helps them, and they have very low pitched squeals. And unfortunately, with ocean noise that we cause due to all the cargo ships, they can't talk to each other. So it's essentially in some areas of Australia, some areas of certainly in many areas of the Indian Ocean, and even East Africa and Mozambique, this species is functionally extinct, meaning they cannot reproduce fast enough to survive. And so they're going the way of the dodo. You saw how the North and South Pole with climate change, as you saw the NASA reanalysis video, you saw how the North and South Pole got hotter over the last 30 years. In fact, sea ice has been reduced by 70% in the North Pole. Sea ice, by the way, does not add volume to the water, so it hasn't increased sea level rise, always something to keep in mind. But only 3% of old sea ice is still there. The old ice that used to be there, that can tell us about climate over time, right? We can analyze the ice and tell and figure out what's happened in the last few years, in the last few decades, in the last century. If that ice is no longer there, it gets melted every season. That history gets melted with it in the ocean, and it's no longer the mosquito with the DNA of the atmosphere anymore. It's gone. In fact, we're losing a record of climate change because of climate change. We're losing glaciers where that record is because of climate change. We're losing ice sheets because of climate change. And here you can see it very clearly. The Northwest Passage is open. That's the passage from the Atlantic to the Pacific that goes above Canada. And most importantly, and this is absolutely key, and it is a discovery of the Climate Change Institute at the University of Maine, where I work as well. The North Pole, and particularly the Arctic, the Eastern Arctic, that area that's pictured here, has experienced in the last 30 years a temperature increase that the whole world only experienced once in the last 13,000 years. And that's in the transition when we came out of the last ice age into the current age that we know as the Holocene. So That warming, which was very gradual over hundreds of years, hundreds, thousands of years, the last time it happened when we came out of an ice age. And now we've experienced the same extent of the same number of degrees warming in the last 30 years in the Arctic. That's called abrupt climate change. And it's one of the most unstable things, right? It causes instability. When you have a 90-degree day in Alaska, that's not normal. And the same has happened in Siberia, where permafrost is, with enormous deposits of methane that are trapped in the frozen soil. When the methane is expelled by being melted, by the ice being melted, that methane goes into the atmosphere. The methane is 70 times stronger as a greenhouse gas than CO2. So again, unfortunately, a vicious circle that we are causing with climate change, with man-made climate change. And of course, there's habitat loss for animals like polar bears. Everybody's seen these pictures, and the polar bears have to go somewhere, and often they come into our towns. And sea level rise, when you have ice sheets melting, an ice sheet is ice that sits on top of land. So it's adding an ice cube into a glass of water, right? If you add too many ice cubes, the water will overflow. It's not ice cubes that are already in the water that, if they melt, don't add any volume. You're actually adding volume by adding more ice to melt all those icebergs that you see in the news stories. Well, in Greenland, if all the Greenland ice sheets, which is largest in the northern hemisphere, goes and gets melted, we will have an 18-foot sea level rise. 18-foot sea level rise. It's not going to happen overnight, but a 5-foot sea level rise threatens Cohasset and Hall. It threatens most of New York City. It threatens most of Boston. 18 feet is catastrophic. 1 foot will take out Miami entirely. Miami is basically doomed. All insurers for real estate will not insure Miami anymore. If Antarctica actually starts melting for real, it's been melting, but if it actually starts melting for real, then we'll have a 60-foot rise. And that's when, we all move to Montana, assuming they'll want us. This is what would happen. These are at-risk areas in Hall. I live in the red area right here. And so far, I've been very lucky not to be. And this is 1 foot, just 1 foot for Cohasset sea level rise. That's 5 foot. A storm surge, a king tide with wind can bring 5 feet of water. 10 feet is not uncommon. And imagine if you add more volume. This is another map that shows vulnerable population exposure due to sea level rise in Cohasset. And this is at 5 feet. It will change our lives. It will change our real estate. It will be an enormous loss for us. Most of our insurance tables for real estate are based on very old data from the 80s that the Coast Guard and NOAA have, actually FEMA, but those are also based on the Coast Guard. And what we're talking about here is really ice sheets, this part melting. If this ice that's already in the ocean melts, it doesn't add volume. If this ice melts and falls, it adds volume and increases the volume of the ocean. In addition, as you may know, from high school physics, anything that gets warmer, including air, expands. Well, same goes for the ocean. So if the ocean gets warmer, it expands and you have more volume. A third thing that the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, that's the UN, hundreds of scientists from the UN that work on this, one thing that they have never really accounted for is the fact that Antarctica, and I'm going to use my tennis ball here to show you this, Antarctica, that sits at the bottom of the world, has an enormous amount of ice sitting on top of it, right? It's a continent. It's land that has ice on top of it. Antarctica is not like the North Pole, where the ice is floating. In Antarctica, the ice is sitting on bedrock, just like here. That ice in Antarctica is enormous. It's actually not being estimated accurately how much ice there is, because we don't know what's underneath the ice. It's difficult, right? Nobody's seen it. Well, all that ice, what happens if you have all this weight of ice at the bottom of the ocean? You spin the ball, right? The ball spins because it's the Earth. Well, when you spin anything and you have mass, that mass is going to have a magnetic field. And so would you be surprised if I told you that the ocean isn't flat? The ocean is in fact being sucked down to some extent by the mass of Antarctica and its ice. If that ice starts melting, the mass of Antarctica will be reduced, and that magnetic attraction of the water down toward Antarctica will decline, right? Less mass, less magnetic field, water is not going to be sucked down as much. And therefore, you have more water going toward the North Pole, or toward the Northern Hemisphere, which is where we live. So in fact, there is an additional problem associated with sea ice melt. And sea ice melt, of course, affects ocean currents. The most important one for us in the Atlantic is the Gulf Stream. When the Gulf Stream is a current that really starts here in the Gulf, and then warms all of the eastern seaboard and goes across to Europe and warms England. The reason England doesn't look like Norway or Sweden is that the Gulf Stream warms England, so they have more of a rainy weather rather than a snowy climate rather. The reason why the Gulf Stream functions, the reason why this river of water within the ocean continues to run, is that there is a temperature differential between the equator, where it's warm, and the northern, the Arctic, where it's cold. That differential, like everything in nature, it has to be equalized, because nature likes equilibrium. And so the water flows through to the north. In addition, there is also a difference between the salinity of equatorial water and Arctic water, and that also drives the Gulf Stream. Well, if you affect both the temperature and the salinity of water by adding cold, fresh water from both Greenland and Antarctica, that Gulf Stream, that precious current, which has essentially controlled our climate both in North America and Europe for as long as humans have been around, that current will be affected and slowed down. In fact, it has been at this in the last 30 years, it has decreased to the slowest point that's ever been measured. And it continues to be slower. So carbon dioxide, of course, is ending up in the ocean, as I mentioned earlier, and the slowing of the Gulf Stream and the warming of the ocean, especially at the equator, is causing more hurricanes. Of course, as you've all seen, we're running out of letters to name the tropical storms and the hurricanes. And of course, as a result, the opposite, the other side of the coin of the Gulf Stream is the jet stream, and that is the prevailing winds, right? The dominant wind pattern over the North Atlantic that goes west to east over Europe. This is becoming stronger. This jet stream is becoming stronger, which means it'll take a lot more time to come back from Europe on an airplane, because you are going against the wind, and it's also going to be way more turbulent to come back. This all has an effect on wildlife, as I mentioned, also on land. And the effect on wildlife on land is that ecosystems are changed, animals change and migrate just like humans. If there's a drought and people move out and go look for water, so will animals. And if you have healthy animals, you will have healthy people. If you have a healthy environment, you'll have healthy animals. The animals will stay put in their habitats, and as a result, you'll have healthy people. But when these things change, everything changes. So, for example, in 2015, there was 80% of a population of these beautiful antelopes in Central Asia die all of a sudden. 85% of the entire species. Why? Because there was a very humid season in that period, and the bacteria that they've always handled just fine bloomed. They just thrived. It exploded, this bacteria in the soil, due to the ideal conditions for these bacteria to live, and they could not handle it. While they were grazing, they could not handle it, and they all died essentially of gastroenteritis. They all bled of stomach infections. This can happen to us because if we change the environment, we change the temperature of our land and oceans, bacteria and viruses will react to that, and we will be affected by it. For the last 2,000 years, new epidemics have emerged when human populations significantly alter the environment by deforestation, land reclamation, reduction of wildlife habitat, and animal domestication. Whenever you have a contact between an animal that's never seen humans and a human population, you'll have a pandemic, just like COVID. COVID is a perfect example of this. Wildlife trade brought a bat or a civet or a snake or whatever we think it is, certainly an animal from that had never seen humans before. It brought it in contact with humans. Humans got infected. The whole world got infected, and now we're living in our new brave new world. But COVID is not the only one. Lyme disease is a very common occurrence now in the northeast of the United States. Why? Because we have warmer and longer summers, which allow for ticks to produce more eggs and for the eggs to hatch longer. And when you have more ticks that are infected with Lyme disease and you have no top predators to take care of the deer that are everywhere because we killed all the wolves and there are very few bears left, what you have is ticks with a lot of food. And those ticks are just going to reproduce. And so now we have to be very, very careful to go into the woods, don't we? If you go to Wampatuck, there are tick warnings everywhere, and the same goes for Long Island and New York and Maine. Ticks are so common now that you have ghost moose. This is a ghost moose. Moose that have been completely ravaged by thousands of ticks, and they're being eaten alive, right, by these animals and will not survive. This animal, they can have as many as 40,000 on them, sucking their blood. And University of New Hampshire is looking into this. So, of course, not only are these animals infected with the bacteria of Lyme disease, but they're also being bled to death. Vector-borne diseases carried by animals, by either animals or insects, have represented all of our latest pandemics. AIDS, Zika, Ebola, West Nile, plague, COVID-19, all of them are carried by animals, and particularly Zika and dengue fever have increased exponentially due to the fact that we have, again, warmer seasons that reach much farther, much later, and the mosquitoes that carried Zika and dengue fever in particular can now reach all the way up to New York. Soon we'll reach Massachusetts. Climate changes health. Climate change changes health. That's as simple as that. If you don't care about animals, you don't care about anything else in the world, You do care about your own health, don't you? Don't you want to be able to go walk in your lawn and not care about ticks? Well, climate change will change that. So this is the one thing that we can do to think about it. Most recently, I just published this article in CNN showing how climate changed the last great pandemic, the Spanish flu, a century ago. And I showed that abrupt change in climate caused, here I can show you here you can see this abrupt change in climate we see in an ice core, this huge anomaly in how the composition of the atmosphere changed, brought enormous precipitation all throughout the World War I, and especially during the Spanish flu. And during the Spanish flu right here, you can see how precipitation rose and mortality rose together due to this anomaly. Today, we are right around the same second wave of COVID in the same exact period, October, November, December, and we are rising. We're rising for other reasons in cases and deaths. We're rising also because we've had irresponsible public health policies from Washington and several other states. Thankfully, not as much in the Northeast. But climate will affect the way that the virus is transmitted, without a doubt. We know the droplets are transmitted more easily in a humid environment, and there is lots of data to represent, support the fact that climate will make it more easy for the disease to be transmitted to one person or another. At the very least, simply because the temperature will change and humidity will change, and people will try to stay away from it, and in the same environments. And as they do so, the disease will be transmitted more easily. But going back to my study, this enormous anomaly you can see here changed the climate radically for that period and caused the 50 million dead and 500 million cases of the Spanish flu, the most deadly pandemic in the history of humanity. It was exacerbated, it was made worse by climate change, by a climate anomaly, which likely occurred because of all the dust kicked up by the explosions, incessant explosions during the war, which brought dust into the air. And as the dust went into the air, it creates these nuclei which make it rain more easily. It's just a climate. It's a climate system where nuclei end up, where nucleation it's called, where dust basically allows for droplets to form, and then you have a rain event. Rain was everywhere in this period. In the trenches, people were wading in water often up to their neck. And of course, all sorts of lakes and rivers were overflowing. And guess what? H1N1, the cause of the Spanish flu, reaches 65% infection rates in particularly birds and particularly mallard ducks, right around October, November, December. So it's very likely, although we can't prove it because we can't monitor every duck in Europe, especially not in the past, that the climate really first of all, interrupted their migration, and because of the modification of the jet stream, but it also made the water flow from their infected waters, because they infected with their droppings, into the trenches and into even water sources that people used. So what can we do about it? The easiest thing we can do to affect climate change today, easiest thing, start eating salad. Stop eating beef. Beef is the highest carbon footprint food on the planet. It's a small sacrifice. Try Impossible Burgers, try Beyond Meat Burgers. I don't know what to tell you. I'm a vegetarian, but you want to switch to chicken, way lower carbon footprint. But it is the simplest, most important thing we can do right away. Right away. 24% of greenhouse gases come from agriculture. 24%. That's a quarter of all greenhouse gases. Do that. And if we start addressing also the electricity and heat production, which we can do with reduced demand, with electrification, with solar and wind, we can actually take care of that. That's half. If we could just take care of this, that would be half. You can vote your dollars and buy only food grown sustainably and close to you, so that it's not transported over enormous stretches of time and space. You can remember, cattle uses 47% of agricultural land and 80% of vegetables in the United States. 80% of vegetables in the United States are used for cattle, not humans. You take care of, you stop eating cattle, you stop eating cows. All of a sudden, you got 80% of those vegetables available to humans. You can change the 50% of the land now produces food for us as opposed to cattle. I'm not even going to tell you how many hectoliters, how many hundreds of gallons of water it takes to make a burger. It's outrageous. If you want to switch, I'm not telling you to go vegetarian, although it's healthy and wonderful. But you can switch to chicken, you can switch to turkey, much lower carbon footprint. You can use public transit. You can change your bulbs to LED, your light bulbs to LED. All of these things make you healthier. They don't cost anything. They make you healthier. And by the way, in order to use public transit, I have to say we have to have public transit. So cutting the Greenbush line or the ferry to Boston is a really bad idea. And if anybody's hearing that in the audience who can do something about it, please let me know, and I'll tell you what the carbon footprint of that is going to be. Listen to information that's actually about climate and that's well researched. Don't listen to information that is partisan and not based on science. And I'll show you another way you can do that. You can choose a hybrid or electric car if you have to change your car. And renewable energy in your household. And in Hall, we have a lot of renewable energy. We have a committee that's trying to increase that share. Try to do that. Cohasset has the same committee. It's chaired by Steve Wenner, who is in the audience today. And most importantly, vote for people who respect science and the environment. I'm not going to tell you who that is, but I think it's fairly clear to you. And you know, the amount of damage that has been done to the environment by certain administrations as being absolutely catastrophic. You can vote. You can vote today. I encourage you to do so. You want more information about how to vote? Here is another way to get it. I'll show you the website. We just launched it with 2 colleagues from the Climate Change Institute. It's called whyclimateMatters.com. You can find it, you can see it on your phones, you can see it anywhere, you can log on anywhere you want. It's Paul Majewski, who is the top climate scientist in the world. I'm happy to say that. Me and, oops, sorry, did not mean to do that. Me and Charles Norkey, who's a international policy expert. And you have talking points. And these are talking points for moderates. They're not talking points for tree huggers, for the converted, for those of us who already believe. And you don't, I hate the word believe. It's science. You don't believe it. It's a fact. Climate change is real. We are causing it. But those who discount science, those who ignore science and have more doubts, will be more persuaded by these points than anything else, because they address security, health, and wealth. And these are the 3 things that we can really address with those people who are hesitant to really protect the environment, to really start thinking about the environment and start thinking about their behavior. Global security, health, our personal health, and our personal wealth, your real estate. Don't you want to make sure that you have your house to give to your children? Do you want the ocean to take it with sea level rise and stronger storms? Each of these points, you can go click on it, and it will give you links to studies and scientific studies and policy papers that have been peer reviewed. They're all absolutely 100% peer reviewed and established science. So I hope that that will help you. whyclimatematters.com, very easy to find, very easy to share. Last thing, here we go. Last thing, just to show you that it's not a partisan issue. A majority of Republicans and Democrats support several climate policies. Renewable energy, energy efficiency, and CO2. It's only when people start politicizing it in terms of, oh, they believe that, they're horrible people, we believe this, we're better people, which is a bad way to talk about anything in terms of any political issue, any scientific issue. There is no reason to insult the other side. It's an issue of simply looking at the facts and addressing each other's concerns with respect. There's no politics in science. These are facts. What I show you today are facts. I've seen it with my own eyes. I don't get paid by lobbies or by companies to do this. It's just what I know to be true from our own data, which I've produced myself. So with that, I thank you, and I'll take your questions.
Great. Thank you, Alex. That was enlightening. So, so there are a couple of questions. I think some people mailed in some questions. I can actually read one that was actually emailed to us. I think the person in the audience here, Jan Kidwell, I think from the West Coast, if I see this correctly, and she's asking, what are the major obstacles to achieving worldwide commitment to the runaway global temperature increases we experienced for the last 10 years? In other words, what should activists be working on solving? Because I mean, as obviously cannot expect too much from the top right now, so this has to be, I think, grassroots bottom up. But what do you think we can do here?
Yeah, as I said before, the most important thing that we can do in our everyday lives, that we do every week, every day, is change our diet. That's the easiest thing. Just change your diet. Stop eating meat. It's bad for you. It's going to cause cancer anyway. It's, if not cancer, cardiovascular disease, which is the #1 killer in America. So just stop eating red meat. We never historically, ever, never in the history of humanity have we eaten this much red meat on a daily or weekly basis. Just never been the case. Before the 1800s, before cattle raising became the way of the West, an animal, a cow or a sheep, was part of the family for years, and was only slaughtered once a year, perhaps, during a holiday. That's it. That's why it's the Lamb of God. The lamb is sacrificed on Easter, on Passover, because it's the one day. It's not every day. We stop cattle raising. We stop eating beef, which is just an absolutely unsustainable industry. That's already a quarter of emissions going away, and that can happen today. One of the greatest reductions in emissions that we've had over the last 6 months because of COVID has been due to the fact that people are eating less meat because they just don't go to restaurants and they don't shop for it. It's that simple. They had to actually cull a lot of the cattle. The second most important thing we can do is protect land. I've given a similar talk like this a few years ago at the Harvard Conservation Trust at Harvard, Massachusetts, not Harvard University. And, Conservation Trust, the trustees, and many other institutions like that are absolutely an amazing, incredible resource. Governments protecting land. Massachusetts has a fantastic history of this, protecting land. Wampatuck is a great example of it. That is the best thing we can do. Just rewilding, essentially creating wild areas where animals can live, where we can plant more trees. Trees, there's one way to undo what we've done and take out the CO2 out of the air. And there are all these people today, even in the Harvard Gazette, there are all these scientists saying, "Oh, we can do geoengineering and spray sulfuric acid in the atmosphere so that it reflects sunlight, just like a volcanic eruption." Leaving aside the fact that that would cause acid rain and enormous problems. There is a technology that can that can absorb CO2 from the atmosphere. It's really, really amazing technology that has been developed over millions of years. You know what it's called? A tree. You plant more trees, you're going to fix more carbon. And trees are nice to have around. They also create an ecosystem. And they also maintain, they prevent erosion from occurring, and they prevent rivers from flowing and evaporating. If I just show you what the rebirth of trees that has occurred in Yellowstone, because we reintroduced wolves, and wolves chased away the deer, and the deer stopped eating the trees, and the trees came back, and the rivers moved. That's a trophic cascade. That's called the trophic cascade. Nature will fix this if we just take care of nature. And the arrogance we have to think that technology, a human solution to a human problem, will solve it is staggering. It's staggering. We cannot solve for human problems. We can only trust in nature to solve the problem. So first of all, stop eating meat. Second of all, or stop eating beef. And second of all, start protecting more land. There are a myriad other solutions, as I showed you before, but those two things, land conservation and change in agriculture, change in cattle raising, to actually sustainable agriculture, would be an enormous step forward. And we can do it today. You can do it today. You don't need to wait for anything. You can do it tomorrow.
Right. So another question here by Carolyn Nielsen. She typed this in earlier, and she asks, is it known why the ocean temperatures are increasing so much more rapidly in the Gulf of Maine? And we saw that in the image there, but I was wondering about...
I can bring it back up. So the reason we think, and by the way, we are not sure about this, and the reason we think this is that the Gulf current, the Gulf Stream, never really used to hit the Gulf of Maine all that much, right? It used to deviate toward Europe right underneath Cape Cod. So that's why if you go south of the Cape, it's a lot warmer. In fact, if you go south of the Cape around May or June, you'll find tropical fish in Rhode Island. You know why? Because it rides, just like Finding Nemo. It rides onto the Gulf current all the way to Rhode Island, right? What's happening is that because there's warmer water at the equator, because we are warming that area way more, because of course it's exposed to the sun more, and it's covered by CO2 more, that the water's warming, and we're creating eddies, that is deviations of the current. And the Gulf current, the Gulf Stream, is not just a straight line, a straight river. It has all sorts of eddies, a lot of branches, right, which can change over time. And I think a lot of eddies, a lot of branches of the stream are actually curving around around Cape Cod. See if I can get it around Cape Cod and actually getting into the Gulf of Maine, as opposed to going straight straight east or northeast. There are more eddies, more branches of the Gulf current going into, But I want to stress that we don't know this because the data for oceanographic, for ocean science, for climate science in the oceans is way less precise than we have for the atmosphere. Because historically, we've had way fewer investments in ocean science, in ocean climate science, than we've had for atmospheric science.
Yeah, so I see just a couple of chats here going on, but do we want to open up the floor? Susan, anybody use the hand raising tool? You can introduce yourself. Alex, how are we doing on time?
We're at 6:52, which is an hour and 20 minutes.
I mean, do you have any commitments or have to
I'm
go? Or?
okay. I cleared my schedule, so I'm happy to hang out and answer questions. I'm seeing a lot of mostly depressed. Damn it! I was trying to show you pretty pictures. I was trying to show you good stuff.
It's always a mix.
Power here. We can do things. Come on, guys.
Right.
We can change the world.
All right.
And then,
Anybody want to chime in here?
Alex, do you also have questions that have gone to you directly in the chat?
No,
One-
privately, hang on.
One I sent on to you from Sine. I'm not sorry. I don't know how to say your name. Sorry. About
Yeah, Sine. How should we manage woodlands, wildlands, so we don't have wildfires? Okay, this is first of all, I'm not a pyroecologist, nor am I a forestry person, but I did. I do play one on TV. No, I actually hosted during Climate Week in September. Same week I was releasing my article because I had nothing else to do. I hosted a panel with the chief of the battalion that's fighting fires in San Jacinto in California in the Central Valley. And I'll show you another thing while we talk about that. Actually, I'll show you our brand new website and a great graphic that shows you what I'm talking about. So this is why climate matters. And here we go. This is the current state of California, right? These are all the active fires in California right now. This is our food. 40% of our fruit and vegetables come from here. 40% of US fruit and vegetables come from here. We have a ring of fire around our fruit and vegetables right now. That's called food insecurity. If this goes, we can't eat. It's that simple. So, and by the way, California's had a multi. They had a drought that lasted more than 5 years up until 2017, and it keeps coming back. So that drought has dried out the yellow areas that you see here, where you see the fires, right? In addition to that, a lot of people have moved in those areas because they don't want to live in San Francisco because, it's $3,000 a room, not even an apartment in San Francisco on average. So they go and go to San Jose, or they live in Palo Alto, or they live in these areas that are forested, traditionally have been forested, and they go way into the forest and buy up the land because it's not controlled by the federal government. It's not controlled by the state government. They get leases and they build their houses. Guess what? Those areas get dry because of drought, increased drought, and they get dry because of climate change. And then because of climate change, you get storms, especially thunderstorms. You don't have to have a cigarette butt to start a wildfire. All it takes is a thunderstorm. And a lightning bolt hits that area, and all of a sudden you have a wildfire. Now, in normal times, before we really messed up the environment, really messed up the climate change, you just let that fire burn, and the forest replenishes itself, And the fuel, as the firemen call it, right? All the down trees and all the brush, all that fuel just gets burned, and that's it. For the last century, because of this continuous movement of people into these dry areas and building houses, just go to Malibu, just go to the canyon, Topanga Canyon. It's houses upon houses upon houses, way into the woods. Same thing in this area of California. Because people have been doing that, firefighters have to go and save them. You see it on television all the time. All these people are trapped, and we're like, oh my God, poor people, poor people. Yes, poor people, but who the heck told you to build a house in the middle of a wildfire plain? I mean, that's the problem. So because there are people there, we can't let the fire burn. We haven't let the fire burn for a century. Therefore, fuel has accumulated for a century. And now we have the entire state on fire because a century worth of wood and brush, which has been dried out by climate change, by man-made climate change induced droughts, is just kindling. It's just a matchbox. We've created the matchbox. So it's not an easy solution. What we need to do is, first of all, move people out of forests that are pristine environments, that should remain pristine environments. You don't want to be there. It's not your ecosystem. Let the bears live there. Let the animals live there. And bring them back to the cities or go somewhere else. Do not build people, do not create excuses for those fires that should be natural to be put out and then have more fuel build up. I'm not saying you need to let the fires burn everywhere and let all the forests burn everywhere. I'm not saying that. But we cannot continue to create kindling matchboxes everywhere around the state. And the firefighters, there aren't enough. In California, there aren't enough. There's just not enough people. They've taken, excuse me, they've taken convicts to help them in fighting fire. They've asked for firefighters from all over the country to go and help them fight fire. One thing the government could do is nationalize the National Guard and help fight fire. But guess what? It hasn't happened. Probably because the governor of California is Democratic. But this is a complicated question.
Yeah, particularly if the genie is already out of the box. I mean, the developments have been made and established. So I mean, like, how are you gonna? I mean, do you rezone this, or I mean, this is almost impossible to do.
Well, no, I don't think it's impossible. I think so. The reason why I work in 3 different universities and 3 different states is that I work in an interdisciplinary field. I have created this from my PhD all the way to now. And the reason for that is that I realized that you can't approach this problem from one discipline only. As a statistician, or as an atmospheric scientist, or as an oceanographer, or as an ecologist, you just can't, because each part of nature interacts with another part of nature. As John Muir used to say, if you tug one string in nature, you will find that everything else is attached to it, right? So what does that mean in terms of an answer, a theory of everything? The simplest thing that we can know, perhaps the oldest wisdom in human nature, is that wisdom starts by knowing how much we don't know, right? If we just assume that we don't know how nature works and it's complex, and then we will never figure that out, even with the best computers, even quantum computers and the best models, we will never know how a trophic cascade would really unfold, right? So what we can do is accept that, be humble about it, and stop solving for human problems and start solving for natural problems. Bring nature back to its normal equilibrium And once we do that, nature will take care of itself. We have evolved in nature. Up until 2,000 years ago, we hadn't really messed it up all that badly. But for the last 2,000 years, we have messed up pretty badly. In the last 200 years, really, really badly. In the last 50 years, we've completely gone nuts. So we need to start solving, what does nature need? That's the answer we need to ask. That's the question we need to ask. What does nature need? What is the normal state of nature? Let's restore that. So protect land, stop changing the atmosphere, live in a sustainable way. Whatever we cannot do forever is not sustainable. So what can we do forever to sustain ourselves? That's the question. There are answers to this. People have lived this way in places in the world. We have seen a little bit of this during COVID. We haven't had 50 million dead. We've had 200,000 dead, 220,000, mostly avoidable by policy. That's mostly caused by policy, not by the disease. We could have avoided it. We avoided it during the Obama administration. There wasn't another H1N1 pandemic. So we slowed down. And guess what? The air cleaned up in Europe and China. And we saw that did their economies collapse? No. They're still there. Are we still getting our products? Yeah. Are we still eating? Yeah. Are we alive? Yeah. So is it possible? Yes, it's possible. We just did it. So why can't we not do it more systematically rather than a dumpster fire approach as we have for the last 6 months? We just proved it to ourselves that we can do it. So we can.
Yeah. Well, I read your work about the lead pollution. That was quite amazing. With the ice core drillings that you did a couple of years ago, I think with in Switzerland, was that?
Yeah.
So you actually had, it was interesting to see that the lead pollution went to zero in these 4 years where the Black Death was at its peak.
Right. Just so everybody else gets on track with it.
Right.
This is what Carsten's talking about. So in 2017, one of the first articles of my project, we looked at this very high resolution pollution record for the last 2,000 years of Europe. It's the highest resolution climate and pollution record on the planet. It's the most detailed climate and pollution record on the planet. So we basically showed for each year, in fact, almost each month for the last 2,000 years, what the pollution was in the most densely populated area of the world. That's Europe. And you know how they say, hey, they look at this, just this. And this is from 1970 to the present, right? And they say, hey, look, clean air laws worked. And now, right here, we are at clean air. Somebody keeps saying we have had the cleanest air in human history, right? We keep hearing that on certain channels and by certain people. We have the cleanest air, because if all you've lived in is this, or even this, then you've seen just a drop in pollution. Well, guess what? Not so much. Not so much. This is the cleanest air we've ever had, right here. And it happened when 40 to 60% of the population in the world died due to a giant pandemic, which by percentage of people dead was the largest pandemic in history. And so everything stopped. Everything stopped. People stopped working. This collapsed the economy completely. When you have 40 to 60% of the population, that would be, 150 to 170 million people dead in the United States today. It would be 3 to 4 billion people dead worldwide if we had it today. That drops the pollution to zero. That's what happened 700 years ago. We hope this never happens again. Of course, we don't have a pandemic like this, but it did happen once for 5 years, and we all of a sudden saw clear skies. And we saw what the air is supposed to be like. And this is lead, which is one of the most common man-made pollutants and most toxic. But you can do the same thing for other toxic pollutants. when I published this article in 2017, we had all sorts of criticism coming, including lobbies for lead that actually completely misrepresented what I was saying exactly the opposite. This was one of the fake articles that went viral. And they said that's not possible. Pollution only started with the Industrial Revolution. We'd never polluted before, right? And this is one of the articles that did that. I had scientists write opinions saying that I was wrong. Guess what happened last March, April, and May? The same exact thing. The same exact thing. I can show you the article on Science and National Geographic and whatever you want. And well, Nature would be good, but I'll just show you the maps. And that's what happened. So I basically predicted the future 3 years ago. I hate to be always right, but unfortunately, when you study interdisciplinary stuff in general, you get very accurate. So the pollution has dropped enormously for the United States. This is nitrate, which comes from cars. It comes from nitrous oxide, excuse me. Comes from cars. Comes from all sorts of other industrial and agricultural activities. The same has happened in Europe. If I can only find the article with the map, maybe I'll just go to the images. There you go. Mm-hmm. This is China, before and after. This is Europe, before and after. Same exact thing happened. So the difference is that 700 years ago, we needed half of the population to be dead. And today, we just all wore masks and stayed home and started Zooming. And guess what? The economy continued going. We are not collapsed. We actually started doing really well for a while there until some people reopened, without justification and caused more death. So I'm trying to read all the questions. Should we be engineering a way to collect and remove red filamentous algae here in Cohasset, eelgrass beds and lobstering areas to bring it back to local if needed? I don't know that. I don't know that there is a way to remove the red Heterosiphonia japonica algae. I would love to talk to a marine botanist or a marine ecologist. My guess is we need to find something that eats it. But there's so much of it that whatever eats it, we're going to have a lot of too. So, imagine if lobsters ate them, then we would have a lot of lobster. They've tried to do the same thing in the Caribbean with trying to find sharks that would eat the same type of sharks. They would eat lionfish, and the sharks won't do it. They just won't do it. It's the divers are going out and shooting the fish, and it's just not enough. Let's see. Should we manage woodlands, wildlands so we don't? Oh, I read that. What kind of diseases can be caused by eating red meat, and how much should we be worried about? Red meat has been associated with cancer, especially stomach and colon cancer, and of course cardiovascular disease. So the fat in red meat is the worst for you, and it basically gets deposited in your arteries and veins, but particularly your arteries, and it creates these lumps of fat. And once those lumps of fat come loose, they start circulating in your blood, and they can cause strokes. And if you're luckier, they just restrict blood flow, and so restrict the stretchiness of your veins, so you get what's called sclerosis, so you don't react well to physical activity. and you can actually have serious neurological problems associated with that because you don't have enough blood flow to go through your brain, and your brain is not oxygenated enough to function properly. Let's see here. Local alternative, yep, ask Steve Wenner for the Alternative Energy Committee. That's is there. He's the most knowledgeable person on the subject, more than me, without a doubt. In Hall, if anybody from Hall is around, Judith Van Han is doing the same thing. We have a committee. Unfortunately, since I've been in New York, I've been less active. Okay, thank you very much for the lecture. It was very fascinating. Okay. The facts are terrifying, as I'm reading here, but, you know, there is this great, I don't know if any of you remember or have read or heard recently the inaugural speech by John Kennedy in 1961, January 21st, I believe it was. Right before the quote that everybody knows, you know, ask not what your country can do for you. He says, few generations are allowed the challenge of defending freedom, and it's our maximum danger. How about few generations are allowed the challenge of defending nature, the environment, and it's our maximum danger. And he goes on to say, you know, I do not shrink from that responsibility. I welcome it. The energy, the faith, the devotion that we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. And the glow from that fire will truly light the world. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. That spirit is what we need in this effort. It's what we need for this endeavor. I'm excited about the endeavor. I'm excited about the possibilities. We have changed the economy already 3 or 4 times in the last 150 years. We can do it again. We can do it again. We've done it for World War II. We've done it in the 1960s. We have done it in the 90s with the internet. We can do it again. And we will actually lead the global economy again, which we do not do anymore, by innovating and creating jobs that are based on technologies that are in the United States, that are sustainable. With better jobs, new job. Who wants to dig a coal mine when you can control wind power from a computer screen? You should go see the Lowell hydroelectric plant that's controlled by Enel that I've seen. It's like being in a starship. It's like being on the Enterprise. If only we could have that everywhere. That hydroelectric plant with that dam has been around since the 1850s. Since the 1850s, we've harnessed that river. And there's a fish elevator too, so the fish don't get caught in it. It's amazing. We have this technology. We have the possibility. We just have to believe that we can do it, and we have to start behaving like we can do it. And vote the right people that listen to us.
Yeah.
Schools, crisis.
I think we have even some international listeners here. I think the recent chat just came in from someone in the UK. Schools are definitely a way to combat the climate, the crisis, in my opinion. Unfortunately, the classes I've had on climate and the environment are somewhat lacking. And that person, I think she's here still attending from the final year of the UK high school.
Yeah.
And I've learned more about climate in the past hour. Well, that's to you, Alex. Thanks for doing this. Than I have in the past 5 years.
Yeah, well, and, you know, the reason for that is, unfortunately, that a lot of scientists rarely take the time to speak in plain English, either because we get really used to using complicated words, and because a lot of people just want to hide in their labs. You know, by doing what I'm doing right now, I'm taking a huge chance. This is being recorded. I could say something completely idiotic, and that'll follow me until the end of days because the internet is forever. But guess what? If I don't do this, nobody does it, you know. And the climate talks here these days are so complicated. Even even Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth, it's complicated. It's too complicated. They are not making it about people. I mean, my desire is to go and ask people and actually listen rather than talk at you. I want to come and listen to how you have experienced it. And that's what's most important. It's to listen to the people, how they have experienced. Tell that story. Tell the story of those habitats, those communities that have most been affected, including us, Cohasset, Scituate, Hall. I mean, anybody remember the 3 nor'easters we had a couple years ago in a row? The chunks of seawall that went into the ocean. We are on the front line of this. Let's listen to those stories. How have those people experienced it? Do they believe or not in the science that proves that this is happening? And if all scientists actually got off their rears and started talking to people, to put a human face on things, and build websites like this one that I built in a couple of weeks, or go into communities, even do it for free. So what? So what? Take the time. This is the most important thing you can do. But most people are happy just publishing their articles and going on vacation. And well, I mean, it's just not okay. So what we need is a major commitment from people to from scientists and educators and citizen scientists, all of you, to go and talk. And that's why I built those 10 talking points. So you all can just read them up and say, hey, you know what? I can talk about climate now. And that's what it is. And do it respectfully. Don't call anybody stupid. If you just challenge the facts on which they're based on, their convictions are based on, just challenge those facts. Don't challenge them. It's not about them. You don't get anything anywhere by insulting the person. It just doesn't do anything. Just talk to them. When I go to the South and give this talk, the lobster becomes a frog. How do you cook frog legs? And I look different. I'm now wearing a vest. I'm different. So what? Just talk to people like they were your friends, and actually you're interested in them having a conversation with you. And some people, you're not going to convince everybody, but you'll make progress. And we guys just make it cool, guys. We just got to make it cool. Yeah, fashion is a great tool to if this is the cool thing to do, and it's a cool thing to do. Nobody orders a porterhouse in Los Angeles. Every restaurant has a vegan menu. Every restaurant has a gluten-free menu. How is that possible? Everybody now is health nut. No, it's fashion. It's fashion. That's all it is. Light up a cigarette in the middle of New York City. See how the looks you're gonna get. 30 years ago, that was totally different. Why? Fashion. It's fashion. Oh, cigarettes. Pot everywhere, but cigarettes, not so much. Not so much. So yeah, no, we gotta all do it. Change the culture. That's all we gotta do. Just change the culture, make it cool. Don't be afraid of doing it, and I think that we can really make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Great. So, any further questions here? Do we want to open up the floor, or Jack, Susan?
Does anybody have a question? They can raise their hand and we'll get to you.
Because I think we should be starting to close a little bit.
I'm reading quickly. I'm sorry if I missed anybody.
So this is recorded. We have on this call actually a lot of people who do a lot of work locally, making a difference. We had some of them on our panel that we just had Changemakers panel. And unfortunately, we only allowed them 5 minutes to describe many, many things, which is far too little. But we can certainly put people in touch with people that are doing good things here. And Katie Holden, maybe we should get that conservation coffee going again somehow. And that was a nice informal way for people to share ideas. And also, like, I mean, look across the room and see some of the faces that I'm seeing right there nodding. Who are doing good work locally, and it is helpful to see the faces of other people who care. We care, we do, and people make a difference in the way that suits their skill set. So if you're not a politician, don't try to be a politician. But if you're an artist, go make art that makes a difference. If you are a politician, if you love that kind of stuff, go for it. So I think that finding your own niche and feeding off of some of the information, the science facts that we've seen, and thinking about what is the best way to present that to others, using who you are and what your own skills are is a good way to go.
Absolutely. I think, the other thing is just be proud of nature. Start taking pictures. You know what happened during COVID? I'll show you last graph. This is really cool. I think you guys will love this. Last graph. Here we go. Assuming that I'm actually logged in. Nope, I'm not. Okay, let me just log in very quickly. But basically, during COVID, people's movement changed a lot, right? They stopped going to work, of course, and I'm not. Oh, sorry. And they stopped even some going to the grocery store, going to the mall. Of course, Twitter is authenticating me because things have to be complicated. And so you can track people's movements over time. You can track where they go. You can track, and Google does it. I don't know how they do it. Kind of scary to think about, but check this out. This is amazing, and this is where I get my enthusiasm. Oh, what happened? Here we go. So this line, all these lines decreasing are grocery stores, retail, transit station, workplaces, right? All dropped in April. Nobody was moving anymore. The one place where everybody went, parks.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a wonderful one in right at our doorstep. We have multiple ones. We have Wonderland. We have World's End. We have Wampatuck. We have the Weir River Woods. We have the Weir River Estuary. We have a ton of parks. And if people just reconnect with nature, reconnect with animals, understand that animals have importance on their own, then things will get better because again, it becomes cool to be an environmentalist. Just look at all the brands, Fjallraven, Helly Hansen, whoever, they all are running ad campaigns all about nature. Fjallraven is Nature is Waiting. I don't recall what Helly Hansen is doing, but these are all everywhere, and so corporate social responsibility, so sustainability is becoming a major part of every company. So we can't actually inject this in every company, and if you see a product that doesn't have it, don't buy it. It's that simple. Vote your dollars. It's the easiest thing you can do. So I'm putting my handle in the chat for everybody, and my email. There you go.
Great.
If you want to keep in touch, you'll see that all I do is post pictures of nature. Because I think that that's how you make people care. You can give them all the graphs you want. They don't understand them. You see, they see beautiful nature and they're like, oh, wow, no, I want to protect that. Right?
Great. Thanks a lot, Alex. That was
Yeah,
awesome.
my pleasure. Anytime, anytime. And thank you for having me, and thank you for everything you do in educating people and making them passionate about the ocean and nature. So, yeah,
Okay.
pleasure.
Yeah. Wonderful spending the time with us. We really enjoyed it, and I think it woke us up. We need more of these moments. Hopefully, we get this. Well, we should keep going to parks, and World's End and Wampatuck. I do a lot of bike spins there too, but like I say, everybody craves that things go back to normal one way or another, but then again, it might not be such a good thing after all, as we know it. Anyway.
Yeah, I hope that we can do this in person too at some point soon in the future. Somebody is asking for my email.
Yeah, we have a physical facility at Cohasset Harbor, a building that we occupy and that we use particularly socially distanced with few people at the moment, But
Well,
usually we're hosting the lectures there, but just not at the moment,
Right. And we can
On the other hand, we have the luxury here of having a lot of international people dialing in, This is also great, I think, a new experience for us because we're really a small local environmental educational organization. Jack, you wanted to say something?
I did. I just wanted to say thanks to Alex, but I heard him say that we should do this in person, and Susan and I have been chatting on the side. And so, Alex, we have several days and expeditions planned for you. So.
Oh, fantastic. I can't wait.
We're thinking most of the summer would be good.
Yeah, no, it'd be great. I spend my summers in Hull, always, and most of the time I can in Hull. So it'd be great, and I can hook you up with Blue Ocean Watch with videographers that are the videographers of Star Wars, and they are all dedicated to ocean science now. So we can bring them in and also broadcast stuff on their website and social whenever. To make it really big impact. Be great.
All right, so for everybody listening, there's the challenge. Help pull this off and get Dr. Moore and his crew for multiple visits with all of us in Cohasset.
Yeah, that'd be great. I love Cohasset. I hope in the future, don't tell my old friends, but I hope in the future to be able to afford living there. But I do love being in Hull too.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say a couple of things that CSCR has been doing for those of you who are on the call and don't know. This year has been a little different, of course, but we did amazingly well, I'd say. We did have students out in the field all summer doing research with masks, 6 foot apart and outdoor as much as possible. We had a group of students that were out swimming and dropping GoPros into the eelgrass. And we saw a lot of that red algae that he showed us. And we wonder whether it's actually wrapping around the eelgrass and cutting it off. And those guys are doing really well. They were funded by the Margeau Foundation, and one of them just presented at the New England Estuarine Research Society last week. That was Beck Labash, who's been adding a lot of technical skills to the group. Jack Buckley has been working with a group of students on salt marshes, and they've been talking about the storm tide pathways, and they've been mapping them. And they've actually put out little places for you to take pictures of the marsh to help document. So some of those signs might be a little waterlogged right now, but he can get you the information about how to participate in that endeavor. And that's students are keeping track of that.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And then with the school year, we've been teaching an ArcGIS course at the high school, with the high school, and with funding from the Cohasset Educational Foundation. And that's been really interesting. So ArcGIS is mapping software. So some of the maps that Alex showed there probably came from ArcGIS. And our students have been looking at making their own fire maps. That was one of the very early lessons that we did. And they're also able to track anything you want. They've just, in the last class, we developed an app called Quick Capture, which enables you to run around with your phone and just ping what you find. and contribute that to data that everybody can use. So the possibilities of us as regular citizens, whether you're young or old, there's plenty of them here, and we really actually can make a difference, and we can inform each other with real solid science that we know based on being out there. So I think that's pretty fun, and we also love to get people out in the world and inspiring that enjoyment of nature. And we've been trying to push eco expeditions. That's one of those things we keep wanting to do. So, so the Center for Student Coastal Research definitely welcomes your support, either financially or in contributing your skills and your knowledge, or your mentorship, or your students. So keep us in mind.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Alex, for spending more than 2 hours with us. So I think everybody enjoyed it. Everybody's taking something home, a new fact, new passion, new ideas, you know. So I hope that we're going to emerge out of this COVID situation and all do a few things different, you know, in a good way. So
Rebuild better.
Yeah, right.
Honor.
Well, good luck to you, and good luck to everyone who dialed in, and it was good. We enjoyed it. Thank you again, Alex. Appreciate it.
Okay, have a good night.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Same to you. Same to everyone.